When we speak to people who are pro-zoo, we have a conversation with them and we say, what is it about zoos that you like? And they say that they think that endangered species are being held in zoos and they're being bred and released back into the wild, which just goes to show that zoos are really good at putting that image out, when in reality very few animals are ever making it back into the wild. Animals do suffer psychologically from being in the trade and in captivity. This subject is not very well known, nor is it very talked about, but it does happen and it is a huge, huge problem.
When you've got people who are financially motivated at the top, you will never have the direct care that these often very exotic animals need.
Generally, depending on the length of time they've been in captivity and what they've been exposed to in captivity, you throw them back out there, then what are their chances of survival?
Our organisation wants to see a world where animal captivity doesn't exist. We don't think animals should be used for entertainment purposes, and we know that animals have a lot of needs and that we can really struggle to meet those needs in captivity.
Everybody that works here are working towards the same end goal, that we actually don't need to be here anymore. We don't want there to be a demand for a sanctuary and a safe place for rescued primates.
Our organisation is called the Captive Animals Protection Society. We focus on issues affecting animals that are held captive and the use of animals in entertainment like circuses and in the media as well.
I used to work for a big corporation who own a very large, well-known safari park. People who are financially motivated at the top, you will never have the direct care that these often very exotic animals need.
What we found is that many zoos, they claim to be about conservation and they claim that they are housing endangered species. Yet if you look at an average zoo, you could see that a very small number of those animals that they're holding captive are actually threatened in the wild in any way.
As people, we need to understand nature and animals and where these things originate from and where is their natural habitats.
When children go in that, they maybe don't necessarily recognise the fact that these animals aren't native to this country, that they shouldn't necessarily, whether they should or shouldn't be in zoos.
I know there's a lot of animals that can survive really well in a zoo environment and actually have really good standards of living, good welfare. Of course, there's a lot of controversy. There's some animals that perhaps don't do so well, and certain animals that can be quite susceptible to mental issues.
There have been examples where zoos have killed groups of primates that were healthy.
Zoos hopefully shouldn't be selling these animals to the pet trade. I'm sure that that's where some of them are sourced from zoos that don't keep the same standards as others do.
In the UK, it is actually legal to own a primate as a pet.
People are able to go out and buy animals without necessarily having the right knowledge on how to look after them or what to do when things go wrong.
I've witnessed first-hand animals that I have no idea where they've come from, and it's been very dubious where they've been sourced from, just being kept in the most appalling conditions that they just absolutely shouldn't be.
Joey was a capuchin monkey who was actually taken from the wild directly to be kept as a pet in the UK.
He was kept in a cage no bigger than the size of a wardrobe, but no one was there to say to her that that was wrong. She didn't have the right knowledge in how to keep Joey at the time.
His owner did everything that she was legally meant to do in the UK. She obtained a DWAA licence, which is a Dangerous Wild Animals Act licence, but unfortunately it was never renewed.
Even though there is a licence in place, we frankly don't think it's good enough. It's something that is put in place by the local authority, who have a huge range of issues that they're responsible for, and we don't think wild animal care should be in their remit.
Because that licensing was never renewed and never checked, it meant that Joey spent the next 9 years of his life in this cage with no access to natural sunlight. He only had a polar bear, cuddly toy polar bear, for company. He had the TV turned on for him, either all day, every day, or for 23 hours of the day.
So the way that the law works at the moment, animals aren't necessarily being defended as much as they could be. The penalties for people that have been prosecuted aren't always good enough. People can be convicted for unnecessary suffering. What's unnecessary suffering? It's so vague, and that is where people find the loopholes and people get out of it.
When we first rescued him, we didn't really know how he was going to deal with this and how he was going to survive. His skin was very, 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 very pale, and he was very, very poorly. And we just didn't know how he was going to cope and be able to adapt to the situation. So because of the no access to natural sunlight, he developed metabolic bone disease, which is that his spine is fused with his pelvis. He has problems with his jaw. Joey also suffers a lot with rocking. All he knew what to do to deal with this situation that he was in for 9 whole years was he would just rock, constantly, constantly, constantly rock.
At one point, the keepers thought that he might not improve and that maybe it'd be better for him to be euthanised because he was clearly suffering quite extensively.
Animals and specifically primates do suffer psychologically from being in the trade and in captivity. This subject is not very well known, nor is it very talked about, but it does happen, and it is a huge, huge problem within captivity. We have monkeys that pace, that rock, head twist.
One monkey, he actually bit through his own tail because he was kept confined in an illegal zoo.
She runs her fingers over her teeth like that, so something's a little bit stressful or her anxiety is heightened or something's changed that she doesn't like, she'll resort back to that, which you can imagine is incredibly painful.
At the place I used to work for, the cheetahs just going along 5 metre line just along the fence.
They may self-harm where they are removing fur and skin from their tail or their limbs.
ingestion and then regurgitation, which basically means that they will eat something and then force themselves to be sick again, and then they can then re-ingest that sick as well. It can sort of go on and on and on, and that obsessive behaviour. Unfortunately, the list is endless, really.
Joey, amazingly, did start to respond, and every now and then you saw that he was reacting to the call of one of the other monkeys.
He has just done incredibly well. He is just such a... He's just sort of an icon, really.
He started to come outside into the kind of the outdoors, which obviously was something that he hardly experienced in his whole life.
We adapt our enclosures to be able to let him get around.
Now he's in the stage where he's at, where he lives with the monkeys, he's got a best friend.
When Kodak was rescued, he was kept as a pet in Greece. When he came here, he was extremely bolshy, and we started introducing him into a group. But he didn't know how to act as a monkey. He didn't know how to be a capuchin. So he came in very, very strong. In actual fact, Joey and Kodak being together, Joey calmed Kodak down so he could socialise with him properly. And then Joey was in a position to actually be able to socialise with him and play with him, because Kodak had calmed himself down so much. Their friendship really started to develop, and now Kodak has actually developed so much and learnt so much from Joey that he's now alpha of his group.
People are disconnected from the fact that animals are living things. Animals do have a consciousness, and that they are able to feel certain emotions, but that's when you then struggle with anthropomorphism, and people put human attributes onto animals, and that again can lead to the misinterpretation. People can think they're perfectly happy, but actually they're suffering.
If you visit a zoo and you see a gorilla, you may only see that animal for that day a year or a couple of days a year, but that gorilla can be in there for year after year after year, possibly sat in the same enclosure, and every time you go back, nothing has changed for that gorilla. You know, you may have had a family, you may have had all these fantastic experiences, but that world for the gorilla has not changed at all.
So obviously the great apes, they're quite similar to us. I think it's quite easy to feel empathy for them, particularly in the zoo environment. There can be a lot of welfare issues in terms of mental problems that these animals can get. Orangutans, for instance, you know, there's a good chance that in the next 10, 15 years that they'll be completely extinct in the wild. But at the same time, if their welfare in a zoo environment isn't up to standard, it's a really tricky moral question that we have to ask ourselves.
We live in a world of convenience. The main focus is on getting people through the door.
It's very difficult to manage visitor expectation against what is best for the monkeys. When we are open to the public, we will never force the monkeys out of their indoor enclosures if they don't want to come out. If you come to visit us on a day where none of the monkeys are out, unfortunately, that's a day that none of the monkeys are out. We manage that by using it as an educational platform. We explain why these monkeys are here, we explain why we do the work that we do, and then we can talk in depth about the psychological and physical disorders that the primates suffer from.
So for zoos to have their licence, they have to fulfil an education purpose.
People need to be educated worldwide, and I think zoos have got such a huge platform to deliver those messages. There's a lot of really good high-profile zoos in this country that do really good things for wildlife across the world, but at the same time, there's a lot of zoos that just don't run at the same standards. Sadly, they're not contributing to the wilder world of conservation and research. I think it's quite embarrassing in a sense that we allow this to happen.
Don't know what the future holds really for people.
We've got so many things in archives from over the many years of our organisation existing. They were saying, you know, having animals in circuses is a great opportunity for people to see animals. They never get those chances otherwise. It's educational. And there are a lot of the arguments that we hear nowadays for why animals should be kept in zoos. Nowadays, people wouldn't accept animals in circuses, and that maybe that will happen one day for zoos as well.